Napoleon's French Grand Army suffered a catastrophic defeat on Russian soil. The greatest cause of this failure was not merely the winter cold. The mighty army of 600,000, Europe's strongest, dwindled to mere tens of thousands in just a few months. The Russian campaign was etched into history as Napoleon's greatest failure. But behind this failure lay a structural decision-making error, one still observed in modern businesses and organizations. What exactly was this fatal decision? In this video, we will explain, from three perspectives, why the strongest army collapsed, what Napoleon overlooked, and the lessons modern organizations can learn. Let's delve into the full scope of this collapse. In the main feature, we will also explore Napoleon's psychological state and the intentions of his generals in detail. In 1812, French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte was at the absolute peak of his glory. His dominions stretched across almost the entirety of the European continent. Austerlitz, Jena, Wagram. In countless battles, he had crushed the armies of European powers, earning him the title of Invincible. His army, known as the Grand Army, was composed of multinational soldiers, regarded as the world's finest in terms of training and morale. Its sheer scale was unprecedented. He decided on the Russian campaign because Russia had violated the Continental Blockade, an economic sanction against Britain. An expeditionary force was assembled to punish them, numbering approximately 600,000 men. Even by modern standards, this enormous army advanced towards the Russian border, confident of victory. Napoleon believed the Russian campaign would be a short war, lasting only a few months. His experience and history of victories led him to this conviction. His military genius was unquestionable. All previous wars had unfolded exactly as planned, resulting in triumph. He believed this time would be no exception. This overwhelming track record of success became a subtle precursor that would later lead him to a fatal error in judgment. In June 1812, the Grand Army crossed the Neman River and began its invasion of Russian territory. The initial advance was nothing short of lightning fast. The Russian army adopted a scorched earth policy and a strategy of continuous retreat, avoiding decisive engagements and luring the French deep into Russia's vast interior. It was a cunning strategy. Though the Grand Army occupied cities, food and supplies were burned, stretching their supply lines to breaking point. Still, Napoleon advanced, convinced of victory. In August, Smolensk was captured. In September, a fierce battle at Borodino resulted in a Russian defeat. Despite some 70,000 casualties, the path was cleared. Then, on September 14, 1812, the Grand Army finally entered Moscow, the ancient capital of Russia. Napoleon was certain that Russia would now surrender. The flags of victory unfurled over Moscow, and the soldiers rejoiced. Up to this point, the campaign seemed to be unfolding exactly as Napoleon intended. His tactics had always been correct, his operations perfect. He had no doubt that past successes would yield the same result in this campaign. However, there was no sign of Russian surrender, and no response came from Emperor Alexander I. The situation was subtly beginning to change. Immediately after entering Moscow, the city was engulfed in a massive fire. Believed to be set by the Russians, the Grand Army lost most of its supplies. The city burned, food procurement became difficult. Supply lines stretched for thousands of kilometers, falling into disarray. Soldier morale began to plummet. As October arrived, the signs of the Russian winter grew stronger. It became clear that remaining in Moscow would expose them to the full severity of winter. Many generals urged an early retreat, but Napoleon did not listen. He was still expecting the Russian emperor's surrender. Napoleon spent 5 weeks idly in Moscow. This delay in decision-making would directly lead to an irreversible tragedy. The Russian army gained time, augmenting its forces. They threatened supply routes, preparing to make the Grand Army's retreat even more difficult. But here an unseen trap lay open. It was the excessive past success lurking within Napoleon's own mind. His past victories swayed him away from the rational choice of early retreat. He likely felt that turning back at this point would tarnish his myth of invincibility. This also relates to the Concord effect in modern management, a psychological bias where past investments and efforts are not abandoned, hindering rational judgment. Napoleon was trapped by the conviction that, having paid such an enormous price to reach Moscow, he could not return empty-handed. Furthermore, his inner circle was reportedly filled with yes-men, with few daring to offer dissenting opinions. Information became distorted, impeding sound judgment. Everyone recognized the looming crisis of General Winter, but no one possessed the power to overturn the emperor's decision. On October 19th, Napoleon finally decided to retreat from Moscow. But it was already too late. Temperatures plummeted, and the first snowfall began. The retreat route was fraught with hunger, cold, and relentless pursuit by the Russian army. Soldiers abandoned their supplies, desperately trudging onward for survival. Wagons froze, and soldiers collapsed from starvation. Countless men lost limbs to frostbite or succumbed to exhaustion, falling into the snow. Looting for food became rampant, and discipline crumbled. The soldiers pushed through a hellish march, yearning only to return to their homeland, France. In November, the greatest tragedy occurred during the crossing of the Berezina River. Surrounded by the Russian army, they had no choice but to cross the frozen river. Tens of thousands of soldiers fell into the frigid river or were crushed on the makeshift bridges, losing their lives. This became an iconic disaster of the retreat. In December, Napoleon abandoned his remaining forces and escaped to Poland. The grand army of 600,000 that left Moscow had been reduced to mere tens of thousands. This failure wounded Napoleon's absolute authority and accelerated the anti-Napoleonic movements across Europe. Napoleon was not unaware of the winter's cold or Russia's vastness. He simply underestimated the decision of retreat. This tragedy demonstrates the danger of how past success can sometimes dull judgment and make one avert their eyes from reality. It's a lesson applicable to modern leaders. Napoleon's Russian campaign teaches us the importance of accurately grasping changing situations and making swift decisions based on objective information. Why did Napoleon's strongest army collapse? It was a combination of his overconfidence and the delayed retreat decision, unable to adapt to changing circumstances. What he overlooked was the human psychological trap where his absolute track record of success prevented flexible thinking in a new situation. The lesson for today is the importance of not clinging to past successes, but constantly adapting to changing situations with an objective perspective and flexible thinking. Napoleon's tragic Russian campaign once again challenges us with the importance of knowing when to withdraw, the most difficult of decisions. The quality of decision-making will significantly differ between those who understand this failure and those who do not.